The sizzling sun beat down on Lucas Blackwell's weathered face as he swung his axe into the trunk of an aged oak, sweat pouring from his brow like rain. It was 1878 in Cottonwood Creek, Arizona Territory, and the homestead he'd purchased 3 months prior was proving more challenging than any cattle drive he'd ever led. "Hiya," Lucas grunted, his voice already raspy from hours of shouting commands to himself as he worked. The land around him was beautiful, but unforgiving, a mix of rocky terrain and parched earth that seemed resistant to his every effort to tame it. The 32-year-old former cattle driver had saved for 7 years to buy this plot. After losing his parents to cholera and spending his youth drifting from ranch to ranch, Lucas craved something permanent, something of his own. "Come on, you stubborn." His words dissolved into a hoarse whisper as he struck the tree again. He'd been clearing the land since dawn, determined to have the foundation for his cabin laid before nightfall. The muscles in his arms burned with each swing, but he refused to stop. About a half-mile away, Eleanor Norton adjusted her bonnet against the harsh midday glare. At 27, she'd already lived several lifetimes of hardship. Widowed at 23 when her husband Thomas fell from a horse and broke his neck, she'd managed to keep their small ranch operating through sheer force of will. Now, she eyed the new neighbor who'd bought Old Man Garrett's abandoned claim with curiosity. Eleanor had watched him work for 3 days straight, never stopping except when darkness made it impossible to continue. She admired his determination, but worried about his common sense. No one worked like that in this heat without consequences. "Bartholomew," she called to her aging ranch hand, "I'm taking water to the new neighbor. Would you mind checking the south fence line while I'm gone?" Bartholomew nodded, his weathered face breaking into a gentle smile. "Miss Ellie, always looking after strays. You be careful now." Eleanor filled a large canteen with cool water from the well and loaded it onto her chestnut mare. The ride was short but gave her time to wonder about the stranger. Cottonwood Creek wasn't the sort of place people came to start fresh unless they were running from something or someone. As she approached, she saw Lucas bent over, hands on his knees, coughing violently. His voice, when he tried to speak to himself, came out as nothing more than a ragged croak. "Hello there," Eleanor called, keeping her distance so as not to startle him. Lucas straightened immediately, squinting against the sun to see who had arrived. He attempted to respond but could only manage a painful-sounding rasp. Eleanor dismounted, canteen in hand. "You've worked yourself to the point of losing your voice, Mr. Blackwell," he managed to whisper. "Lucas Blackwell, Mr. Blackwell." She approached and offered the canteen. "I'm Eleanor Norton. My ranch is just over that rise." Lucas accepted the water gratefully, drinking deeply. When he finished, he attempted to thank her, but his voice failed him again. Eleanor took in the massive pile of cut wood, the partially cleared land, and the determination etched into the lines around his eyes. Something about his solitary struggle moved her. "You don't have to do it all alone, you know," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "That's not how things work out here. We help each other survive." Lucas stared at her, clearly unused to the concept of accepting help. His eyes, a deep shade of green that reminded Eleanor of the rare summer rains, held a wariness that spoke of past betrayals. "I can pay," he rasped. Eleanor shook her head. "That's not how neighbors work, Mr. Blackwell. Tomorrow's Sunday." After church, some of the men from town often gather to help with big projects. "I could mention your cabin raising." Lucas frowned, pride warring with practicality on his sun-reddened face. Finally, he gave a short nod. "Thank you," he whispered, the words barely audible. Eleanor smiled. "Rest your voice, Mr. Blackwell, and for heaven's sake, find some shade before you collapse. The land will still be here tomorrow." As she mounted her horse to leave, Lucas touched her arm lightly. "Why?" he managed to ask. Eleanor understood his question immediately. Why would she, a stranger, offer help? "Because 12 years ago, I arrived here with my husband and nothing but dreams," she said quietly. "Our neighbors built our cabin in 2 days. Out here, Mr. Blackwell, solitude is a luxury none of us can afford." She rode away, leaving Lucas standing amid his half-finished work, the canteen still in his hand. That evening, as Eleanor prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread, she found herself thinking about the stubborn man and his determined eyes. It had been 4 years since Thomas died, and though several men in town had made their interest known, none had stirred her interest. Lucas Blackwell was different. There was something in his isolation that called to her, perhaps because it mirrored her own. Though she maintained friendly relations with everyone in Cottonwood Creek, she kept her heart carefully guarded. At his own camp, Lucas sat by a small fire, sipping hot coffee laced with honey for his throat. The woman's words echoed in his mind, "You don't have to do it alone." His entire life had taught him otherwise. Orphaned at 12, he'd learned that depending on others led to disappointment at best, betrayal at worst. Yet there was something about Eleanor Norton's straightforward manner that made him want to believe her. She hadn't looked at him with pity, but with understanding. As if she recognized the ghosts that drove him to work until his body failed. The next morning, Lucas stood awkwardly at the back of the small wooden church in Cottonwood Creek. His throat felt marginally better, though still raw. He'd borrowed a razor from his supplies and cleaned up as best he could, but he still felt out of place among the Sunday finery of the townspeople. Eleanor spotted him immediately. She wore a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes, her chestnut hair neatly pinned beneath a modest bonnet. She nodded in greeting, but made no move to approach him. After the service, however, she introduced him to several men of the town, a blacksmith named Harrington, a shopkeeper called Miller, and 4 ranch hands from neighboring properties. "Mr. Blackwell needs to raise a cabin," she explained simply. To Lucas's astonishment, each man nodded as if this were the most natural request in the world. "Tuesday work for you?" asked the blacksmith. "Got a job to finish tomorrow, but Tuesday I'm free." The others agreed, and just like that, it was settled. Lucas found his voice just enough to express his gratitude, promising to repay the favor when needed. "That's how it works," Eleanor said quietly as the men dispersed. "Your turn will come." "Will you come?" Lucas asked, the words scratchy but clear. "Tuesday." Eleanor looked surprised by the question, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "If you'd like, I could bring food for the workers." "I'd like," Lucas confirmed, holding her gaze perhaps a moment longer than propriety dictated. Tuesday dawned clear and hot. Lucas had spent Monday continuing to clear the land and marking out the cabin's foundation. His voice had mostly returned, though it remained deeper than normal. By mid-morning, 7 men had arrived, bringing tools and good humor. Eleanor followed shortly after with her ranch hand Bartholomew, a wagon loaded with food and drink, and 3 women from town to help serve. What would have taken Lucas weeks to accomplish alone progressed at an astonishing rate. The men worked with the efficiency of long practice, and by midday, the cabin's frame stood proudly against the azure sky. During the lunch break, Eleanor approached Lucas, who stood slightly apart, watching the easy camaraderie of the workers with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. "You're not used to this, are you?" she asked, handing him a plate of fried chicken and beans. Lucas shook his head. "Been on my own since I was 12, worked cattle drives mostly, not much community in that life." "And yet you chose to settle here rather than continuing to drift," Eleanor observed. "Why?" Lucas considered the question, looking out over the land that had called to him. "Got tired of having nothing that couldn't fit in my saddlebags, wanted something that would outlast me." He hesitated, then added softly, "Something worth building." Eleanor's expression softened. "I understand that feeling. Your husband," Lucas said carefully. "How long?" 4 years this October," Eleanor replied. "We came here when I was 16, full of dreams about building a cattle empire." A sad smile touched her lips. "Thomas was killed when a new stallion threw him. I've managed to keep the ranch going, but it's not the empire he envisioned." "You've done it alone?" Lucas asked. "I have Bartholomew," Eleanor replied, nodding toward the elderly ranch hand. "And hired hands during branding season. But yes, mostly alone." Lucas studied her with new respect. "That's impressive, Mrs. Norton." "Miss Norton," she corrected gently. "Or Eleanor, if you prefer. Mrs. makes me feel like my mother." Lucas smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Eleanor, then, and I'm Lucas." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. The moment was broken when the blacksmith called for Lucas's input on a design question. The work continued through the afternoon, and by sunset, the cabin stood complete except for interior finishings. The men departed with handshakes and invitations for Lucas to join them at the saloon sometime. Eleanor lingered, helping to pack away the remaining food. "You have good neighbors," she said as they worked side by side in the fading light. "I'm beginning to see that," Lucas agreed. He hesitated, then added, "Thank you, Eleanor, not just for today, but for—" He gestured vaguely, searching for words. "For telling you that you don't have to do everything alone," she suggested with a gentle smile. "Yes," Lucas met her eyes. "It's a new concept for me. Perhaps we could learn it together," Eleanor said, the words carrying more weight than their simple meaning might suggest. Lucas felt his heart quicken. "I'd like that." In the weeks that followed, Lucas and Eleanor developed a routine. He would ride over to help with heavy work at her ranch several days a week, and she would bring meals to share as he continued to develop his homestead. Their conversations grew deeper, more personal, as trust slowly bloomed between them. Lucas learned that Eleanor had lost both parents to influenza before marrying Thomas, that she loved to read poetry but had few opportunities to obtain books, and that she dreamed of someday having children but feared she might remain alone. Eleanor discovered that Lucas had taught himself to read by lamplight after long days working cattle, that he could play a harmonica with surprising skill, and that beneath his gruff exterior lay a man of profound integrity and unexpected tenderness. By midsummer, the people of Cottonwood Creek had begun to notice the frequency of their meetings. Gossip spread, but it was generally good-natured. Both Lucas and Eleanor were well respected, and most agreed they seemed well suited. On a particularly beautiful evening in late July, Lucas invited Eleanor to dine at his now completed cabin. He had hunted a deer and prepared the venison himself, setting the table with care. Eleanor arrived wearing a dress he hadn't seen before, a soft yellow that complemented her sun-kissed skin. Her hair, usually pinned severely, was arranged more softly around her face. "You look beautiful," Lucas said simply as he helped her down from her horse. Eleanor blushed. "Thank you. It feels strange to dress up. There hasn't been much occasion since Thomas died." Lucas led her inside, where he had arranged wildflowers in a tin cup as a centerpiece. The cabin was sparsely furnished but immaculately clean. "It's lovely," Eleanor said, looking around appreciatively. "You've made it a real home." "Getting there," Lucas replied. "Still needs a woman's touch." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implication. Dinner passed pleasantly as they discussed the town's upcoming harvest festival and Lucas's plans to acquire cattle in the spring. As they finished eating, Lucas grew quieter, more contemplative. "What's on your mind?" Eleanor finally asked. "You've gone somewhere else." Lucas met her gaze directly. "I've been thinking about what you said that first day, about not doing things alone." Eleanor waited, her heart suddenly beating faster. "I've been alone most of my life," Lucas continued. "Figured that was just my lot, but these past months with you." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Eleanor, I never knew what it was to miss someone until I started counting the hours between seeing you." Eleanor's eyes shone with emotion. "I feel the same way. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never expected to find someone who understood me the way you do." Lucas stood, still holding her hand, and came around the table. Kneeling beside her chair, he looked up into her eyes. "I'm not a man of many words, and my voice still gets rough when I'm tired," he said with a small smile. "But I love you, Eleanor Norton. I want to build a life with you, not because I need help or because it's practical, but because every day is better when you're in it." Tears slipped down Eleanor's cheeks. "I love you too, Lucas. I wasn't looking for love, but it found me anyway." He rose and drew her to her feet, kissing her with gentle passion. When they parted, both were smiling. "I haven't done this properly," Lucas said. "I don't even have a ring yet." "But Eleanor Norton, will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will." News of their engagement spread quickly through Cottonwood Creek. The town responded with enthusiasm, planning a celebration to coincide with the Harvest Festival in October, the same month they chose for their wedding date. The months between their engagement and wedding were busy ones. Lucas worked to expand his cabin, adding a proper bedroom and enlarging the main living area. Eleanor began to weave linens and prepare the items needed for their shared home. They decided that Eleanor's ranch, being already established, would be their primary residence, with Lucas's homestead serving as additional grazing land for their combined herds. Bartholomew, Eleanor's faithful ranch hand, expressed sincere pleasure at the arrangement. "About time you found someone worthy of you, Miss Ellie," he told her with a wink. "And a man who can actually fix that leaking roof." October arrived with golden light and cooler temperatures. The town decorated the church with autumn leaves and wildflowers for the wedding, which would be followed by the Harvest Festival dance. On her wedding morning, Eleanor stood in her bedroom, wearing her mother's wedding dress that she had carefully altered. It was simple but elegant, ivory lace over satin that complemented her figure. Mrs. Miller, the shopkeeper's wife who had become a close friend, helped arrange Eleanor's hair with small white flowers. "Lucas won't know what hit him when he sees you," she said affectionately. "That man loves you something fierce, Eleanor. Everyone can see it in the way he looks at you." "I never thought I'd find love again," Eleanor admitted, "especially not with a stubborn man who worked until he lost his voice." Mrs. Miller laughed. "God has funny ways of bringing people together. Sometimes we have to lose our voice to hear our heart." At the church, Lucas waited nervously at the altar. He wore a new suit purchased from Mr. Miller's store and had trimmed his beard neatly. Several of the men who had helped build his cabin stood nearby, offering encouragement. When the church doors opened and Eleanor appeared on Bartholomew's arm, standing in for her father, Lucas felt his breath catch. She was radiant, her face glowing with happiness as their eyes met across the small church. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When asked to speak his vows, Lucas's voice grew husky with emotion, not from overwork this time, but from the depth of his feelings. "I, Lucas Blackwell, take you, Eleanor Norton, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he promised. "I vow to stand beside you in all things, to share your burdens and your joys, to build our dreams together instead of apart, and to love you until my last breath." Eleanor's eyes shimmered with tears as she responded with similar vows. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with a tenderness that made several of the town's women dab at their eyes. The celebration afterward was joyous. The entire town danced and feasted well into the night, toasting the couple who had found love when neither was looking for it. Late in the evening, as lanterns glowed golden against the autumn night, Lucas pulled Eleanor away from the dancers for a moment of privacy. "Happy, Mrs. Blackwell?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Eleanor smiled up at him. "Completely, Mr. Blackwell, though I'm still getting used to the name. We have a lifetime for you to practice," Lucas replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "A lifetime," Eleanor repeated, savoring the word. "That sounds perfect." They returned to the dance, moving together in perfect harmony as the stars wheeled overhead and their neighbors celebrated around them. The first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Winter arrived early, with heavy snows isolating their ranch for weeks at a time. They spent the cold evenings by the fire, reading aloud from Eleanor's small collection of books, or simply talking about their hopes for the future. Spring brought the calving season, and with it, endless work as they expanded their herd with new purchases. Lucas's experience with cattle proved invaluable, and Eleanor's knowledge of the local markets helped them make wise decisions about breeding stock. By their first anniversary, they had established a reputation as one of the most successful small ranching operations in the territory. Their methods were innovative but practical, combining Lucas's years of hands-on experience with Eleanor's sharp business acumen. "We make a good team," Lucas observed as they sat on their porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and purple. Eleanor leaned against his shoulder. "We do. Better than I ever imagined possible." Lucas kissed the top of her head. "Any regrets?" "About marrying a rough cowboy who couldn't even build a cabin without losing his voice," Eleanor chuckled. "Not one, though I do wonder sometimes what might have happened if I hadn't brought you that water that day. I'd have eventually croaked my way into town for supplies," Lucas mused. but I might never have caught your attention." "Oh, I think you would have," Eleanor assured him. "I was curious about you from the moment you arrived." "Were you now?" Lucas teased. "And here I thought it was my pathetic state that won your sympathy." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "It wasn't sympathy, Lucas. It was admiration for your determination, then curiosity about the man behind it, and finally—" She traced his jawline with gentle fingers. "Finally, it was love for the heart I discovered beneath all that stubborn pride." Lucas captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I'm the luckiest man in Arizona territory. And don't you forget it," Eleanor replied with a smile. In their second year of marriage, Cottonwood Creek faced a crisis when drought threatened the region's cattle and crops. Lucas and Eleanor opened their land to neighbors whose water sources had dried up, allowing them to share the deep well that Thomas had dug years earlier. "Some folks would charge for access," the blacksmith commented, as he led his thirsty horses to drink. "That's not how neighbors work," Lucas replied, echoing Eleanor's words from their first meeting. Eleanor, overhearing this exchange, felt a wave of pride and love for the man her husband had become still self-reliant, but now understanding the strength found in community. That autumn, Eleanor discovered she was expecting their first child. When she shared the news with Lucas, his expression of wonder and joy made her fall in love with him all over again. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Eleanor asked, though his face had already answered. "More than I can say," Lucas replied, his voice growing hoarse with emotion. "I never dared to dream of this kind of happiness, Eleanor. A woman like you, a child of our own, a place that's truly home." As Eleanor's pregnancy progressed, Lucas became increasingly protective, taking on more of the physical labor around the ranch and insisting she rest frequently. Eleanor complied with his concerns to a point, but maintained her involvement in the business aspects of their operation. "I'm pregnant, not invalid," she reminded him one day when he protested her plan to ride into town for a meeting with the banker. "I know," Lucas conceded. "It's just, you and this baby are my whole world, Eleanor, the thought of anything happening to either of you." His genuine fear softened her irritation. "Nothing will happen, but if it makes you feel better, you can accompany me to town." Lucas agreed readily, and they made the trip together, discussing their plans to convert one of the ranch's rooms into a nursery. In late spring, with wildflowers carpeting the plains around Cottonwood Creek, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. She had Lucas's green eyes and Eleanor's delicate features, a perfect blend of them both. Lucas held his daughter with trembling hands, marveling at her tiny fingers and the soft wisps of brown hair that covered her head. "She's perfect," he whispered, looking from Grace to Eleanor with eyes full of wonder and gratitude. "You're both perfect." Eleanor watched her husband and daughter, her heart so full it seemed it might burst. "She'll need siblings," she said with a tired smile. "Eventually." Lucas laughed softly. "Let's get you recovered from this one first, Mrs. Blackwell." As Grace grew, so did the Blackwell Ranch. Lucas's innovative breeding program produced cattle particularly well adapted to the harsh Arizona conditions, and buyers began to seek out their stock specifically. Eleanor's careful financial management ensured that their profits were reinvested wisely. By the time Grace was 3, they had added a son they named James to their family. The children thrived in the ranch environment, with Grace already showing signs of her mother's sharp intelligence and James exhibiting Lucas's natural affinity for animals. Life wasn't without difficulties. A particularly harsh winter claimed some of their cattle despite their best efforts. Lucas contracted pneumonia one year and nearly died before Eleanor's relentless nursing pulled him through. Economic downturns occasionally threatened their livelihood. But through it all, they faced each challenge together, drawing strength from each other and from the community they had become integral members of. Lucas served on the town council, while Eleanor helped establish Cottonwood Creek's first proper school. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Lucas surprised Eleanor with a trip to San Francisco, their first real vacation since their wedding. They left the children with trusted friends and enjoyed 2 weeks of exploration and relaxation in the vibrant coastal city. During their stay, Lucas presented Eleanor with a gold locket containing tiny portraits of Grace and James, along with a folded note. "Read it," he urged as they sat in their hotel room overlooking the bay. Eleanor unfolded the paper and read aloud. "To my beloved Eleanor, who taught me that no one has to do it all alone. These 10 years with you have been the greatest blessing of my life. Thank you for the water that day and for everything since. All my love always, Lucas." Tears shimmered in Eleanor's eyes as she looked up from the note. "I remember that day so clearly. You looked so determined and so exhausted all at once." "I was trying to prove something," Lucas admitted, "that I could build something lasting all on my own. Turns out the most lasting thing I've built is what we've created together." Eleanor kissed him tenderly. "And we've only just begun, my love." Their return to Cottonwood Creek coincided with news that the railroad planned to extend a spur line to their growing town, promising economic opportunities for the entire region. Lucas and Eleanor worked with other community leaders to ensure the development benefited local businesses rather than outside interests. As Cottonwood Creek prospered, so did the Blackwell family. Grace grew into a thoughtful young woman with a passion for books and learning, while James developed his father's skills with horses and cattle. 2 more children joined their family: Rebecca, born in their 12th year of marriage, and Michael, who arrived 2 years later. By the time Lucas and Eleanor celebrated 20 years together, Cottonwood Creek had transformed from a dusty frontier town into a respectable community with a proper school, a brick courthouse, and even a small library that Eleanor had helped establish. Their ranch had grown as well, now spanning several thousand acres and employing a dozen permanent hands. Lucas, his hair now streaked with silver but his frame still powerful, had become known throughout the territory for his expertise in cattle breeding. Eleanor's financial acumen had expanded beyond their ranch. She now advised several other local businesses and served on the board of the town's bank. On a warm evening in early autumn, 20 years to the day since Lucas had worked himself hoarse on his homestead, they sat together on the wide porch of their ranch house. Their youngest children played in the yard while Grace helped James saddle a new colt in the nearby corral. "Did you ever imagine this?" Eleanor asked, her hand warm in Lucas's. "That day when I brought you water." Lucas gazed out at their property, the sturdy barn, the well-tended fields, the healthy cattle grazing in the distance, and most importantly, their children moving confidently through the world they had built together. "Not even in my wildest dreams," he admitted. "I was just trying to survive each day then. I had no vision beyond building a cabin and maybe running a few head of cattle." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "And now look at what we've created." "Not bad for a horse cowboy and a nosy neighbor," Lucas teased, earning a playful swat from his wife. "I prefer to think of myself as providentially observant," Eleanor retorted with dignity, though her eyes danced with amusement. Lucas laughed, pulling her closer against his side. "That you were, my love, that you were." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink toward the horizon in a blaze of gold and crimson. "You know," Lucas said thoughtfully, "in all these years I don't think I've properly thanked you." Eleanor looked up at him, puzzled. "For what?" "For those words that changed everything. You don't have to do it alone. I'd spent my whole life believing otherwise." Eleanor's expression softened with memory and love. "And now I know that the greatest strength isn't in standing alone," Lucas said, his voice growing husky with emotion. "It's in choosing to stand together." Eleanor reached up to touch his cheek, her eyes reflecting the last golden rays of sunlight. "I would choose you again, 1,000 times over, Lucas Blackwell, and I you, Eleanor Blackwell," he replied, "every single day for the rest of our lives." As dusk settled over Cottonwood Creek, they called their children in for dinner. Moving together into the warmth of the home they had built not just with timber and nails, but with love, trust, and the profound understanding that life's greatest joys and heaviest burdens are best when shared. Years would pass, bringing changes both expected and surprising. They would welcome grandchildren, weather more storms both literal and figurative, and continue to grow together even as their bodies gradually yielded to time's passage. But through it all, They remained each other's cornerstone, their love deepening with each season that passed. And occasionally, when Lucas worked too hard and his voice grew hoarse with effort, Eleanor would still bring him water and remind him, with a knowing smile, that he didn't have to do it alone. Never again.